everybody, this is Kevin Bredding with Campus Recreation Fitness. Thanks for joining me for another workout. The content of this workout is going to be using a piece of equipment that I think most people might have around their house, or it's certainly a relatively low-cost piece of equipment to obtain. And that is a good old-fashioned fit ball or physio-ball or exercise ball, whatever you want to call it. And we all know crunches, and we all know that we can lay on it and that kind of thing. But I have the idea to throw in a couple of new options there, just to mix it up a little bit. Enjoy. Alright, so I'm going to start with the basic stuff. And when I'm thinking basic stuff, we can think of our core. And our core has four sides to it. We have our anterior side, we have our posterior side, and we have each lateral side. So anterior side first. We're just going to do a basic crunch. But the way I like to do a crunch with the ball, if I have a wall available, I'm going to use it. I'm going to bump my toes up to the top. And if the ball had a corner, I'm going to sit on that corner and then kind of roll forward just a bit. So my knees are roughly 90 degrees. And if I lay back, I can just hang out. And that's going to extend my rectus abdominis, my anterior core musculature. And I can support my head right here. And when I crunch up, I'm going to get to the top and feel the hard part of where the exercise is. If I sit up all the way, it gets easy a little bit, right? And if you palpate yourself, if you touch your own stomach, you'll feel your stomach turn off when you get to the top of the crunch. But if you go back about 45 degrees, you'll feel it still be active. So that's the top of my crunch. I'm gonna extend, crunch up to the top, and then go back down. And I'm gonna pause for just a second, maybe 2 or 3 seconds, purposefully with an exhale as well. Inhale to let everything fill up, exhale into the crunch. And I promise you, if you do this slow and controlled for 15 to 20 repetitions, it's hard. If you're really disciplined in your form, you might not even get to 15 reps. That's my challenge. And then turn it over, work on our posterior core, or our spina rectors. I'm going to basically invert myself from the forward crunch. If I can lay over that ball with my feet on the wall, I like my knees to be bent a little bit so my shins are roughly parallel to the ground. And there's going to be a little bit of angle change at the knee as I do this, but that's my setup. I can keep my hands here in front, just hands on my shoulders. And if I lay over the ball and begin to change shape, I'm looking for a neutral finish. If I hyperextend, true, I get a little more leg recruitment, I get a little more glute recruitment, I get a little more back recruitment, but sometimes that puts the spine in too much of an extended position. So I go to neutral, and if I reach back there, all that stuff is turned on as a tactile stimulus. So self-check, hands surround your spine, and get a sense of, are you turning on the muscle groups that you're trying to activate? Just like the crunch, if we go slow and controlled, 15 to 20 reps, you should have a sense of fatigue in your spine. Try that out. For the obliques, as a lateral crunch, I'm going to use the ball as my fulcrum and lay over that and achieve that lateral spinal flexion down. And when I contract, so right now this external oblique and internal oblique for that matter are a little bit stretched. And when I crunch them back to neutral, they have to be active to help that. And on this one, I can go a little bit into hyper lateral flexion because it's not too egregious on my spine. So I can just go up until I get to the top, and it's a pretty solid finished spot. If I need this hand to stay on the ball to help me balance, that's certainly okay. But the progression is to remove both hands. If I reach this arm up overhead, I'm going to get a further stretch along that lateral line. So that's what I like to do there. In terms of foot placement, I like my top leg to be behind. If my top leg is in front, I don't extend that hip as much, and that hip ties into that outside oblique. And so I get a little more extension if I start with that back leg behind. But ultimately it's personal preference there. Smooth and controlled, 15 to 20 reps should light you up pretty good. You should be like, oh, this is hard, it's hard. So there's that. So now we're going to go on to an exercise that requires our trunk to stabilize. On the other exercises, our trunk was actively moving and we're extending and lengthening muscle groups. But the primary function of our core is to stabilize proximally, which means close to our midline, while the distal segments of our body move around in space. A plank is a good example of that. And a ball can help us do a moving plank. I'm going to use the wall as a safety catch though, but if I start on my knees in an elbow plank on the ball, and then I draw my hips into line, that's a good place to start. And there's already some anterior core recruitment there. If you want to add to this, put the ball further away from you and get in that same plank. And if the wall wasn't there, I could adjust where that ball lands. But I'm going to start with the ball fairly far away, so kind of just my wrists are on the ball. Or rather, I'm going to start so my arms are extended. And then I'm going to use the wall as my starting point and draw the ball in and reach it back away. And the wall prevents the ball from getting too far away from me. As I change the lever arm, it gets harder, right? As I lengthen that, it gets harder. And so a progression of this would be to do this in an open space without the wall there. And you change that lever. In the meantime, your trunk has to stabilize against all that. Try that one out. All right, going back to our posterior core, we're working on our spinal stabilizers. I'm going to use the ball as a surface to lie on and do a bird dog. A traditional bird dog, we're on hands and knees, but this unstable surface means I have to balance a little bit more. But I can still opposite hand and leg with just toes and fingers on the ground. And that's going to ask me to stabilize through my trunk, through my balance perspective. And then progression would be to start to lift more things off the ground, ultimately trying to progress to a full kind of skydiver position. And if I can hang out here, my posterior chain is fairly activated, but it has to respond to my dynamic situation. Ideally, my hands stay up here the whole time because that's going to retract my shoulder blades and pull them back together. And I'm going to have to hang out as I balance on that. That's going to work our stabilizer muscles, which are primarily slow twitch. And so that means they should have a sense of duration with them. They should be able to maintain that contraction for a long time. If we can practice holding that floating position for a minute or 2 or 3, that's going to really help to strengthen up the supportive architecture of our spine. Here I'm transitioning to one of my favorite ways to train a core is on our feet. Because most of the time in daily life, our functional core needs to be strong and stable when our feet are on the ground. It's rare that we're lying on our back in a crunch position that we really need to become strong. It's when we're manipulating through life, we're handling objects and we're lifting things up and moving things around, that our trunk has to remain strong to protect our back and to help us move the loads that we're trying to move. So with the ball, it gives me this wide leverage from hand to hand, and it's light, so I can put it in different places, but it's going to put me at a mechanical disadvantage, which is going to upregulate my trunk. So using a wall and a ball, I'm going to stand perpendicular to it, sideways, and I'm going to push. I'm going to shift my hips over toward the wall and push against the wall, and I can change which hand goes on top. And just notice what that does for you and where you put the ball. You can squat and push, you can stand up, I can change my footprint, but this standing lateral push is my intention with these. If I face the wall, I get a similar thing. I can square up my feet, I can push high, I can push middle, I can push low, and the ball is going to give me some feedback because of its inflated, unstable nature. A little bit harder to do from a posterior side, but I could. If I stand, facing away from the wall, I can still push against the wall. I can push that way. I can push that way. And it's going to ask our trunk to fire and create a structure of stability against all of those different force vectors. And a lot of freedom there. There's a lot of ways to play with that and mix it up. On the duration of the push, I'd give it 3 to 5 seconds. And see what you get with that. Play with those. All right, here's my last idea. We're gonna be on our feet again, and the ball is gonna be a dynamic stimulus to us. We're gonna use a wall as well, but we're gonna go single leg balance with the ball, throwing the ball back and forth. And that's gonna ask a unique demand on our system. It might not feel as hard, but the benefit to the neuromuscular system and the communication there is going to be important. So I'm going to start with my knees bent so that I have some play in my balance. I'm going to face the wall and throw the ball back and forth, trying to become as stable as I can on that grounded leg. Well, I might do 5 or 10 reps on that leg and then switch it up. But I can face perpendicular to the wall and do the same thing. So I have to throw in the transverse plane and catch like that. So depending on how good my aim is, I might have to reach or catch and react to that dynamic stimulus. If you had a heavy, like a medicine ball, and you have a wall that's not going to get a hole in it, if you're throwing a medicine ball around, that would be a progression of that single leg toss in either direction. But check it out, if my grounded leg is close to the wall, and I throw it like that, similar but different than if I switch feet. I can achieve a unique slight shift or slight change of that stimulus. So that's my final drill. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoy some of these. Check them out, play around with them, and move well.